He grew up in a secure Christian household, did well in school, got accepted into the NFL to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, but he chose to go into the business world. And in his 30s, as a married man with children, being driven by his passion to succeed, he became a millionaire. He had it all. But did he? An unexpected crisis redirected the course of his life in unexpected ways. I had the privilege of sitting down with John Sage, the founder of Bridges to Life, at the Billy Graham Center in Wheaton, Illinois, during his visit from Texas. You won't want to miss his powerful story.
Left the Father's side to live a mortal life. You came to dwell among us here. You give life. It is here we take the body broken. It is here we mend our hearts to our brother. It is here that we remember the sacrifice. Oh, what a precious price. You could have had it any way, but you chose us. The body that nailed you to the cross, you give love. It is here we take the body broken. It is here we mend our hearts to our brother, and it is here that we remember the sacrifice. Oh, what a precious price. Oh, the body broken. Oh, our hearts to our brother. I remember the sacrifice. Remember the precious price. It is here we take the body broken. It is here we mend our hearts to our brother. It is here that we remember the sacrifice. And it is here we take the body broken. It is here we mend our hearts to our brother. And it is here that we remember the sacrifice. Oh, what a precious price.
Well, I'm one of 8 children. I was fourth in a family of 8 Irish Catholics, and born and raised in Houston, Texas, where I still live, and went to Catholic Christian education, 1st through 12th grade, and went to college at LSU and came back to Houston, got in the real estate business and worked in that from 1972 to really pretty much into the 90s. And I was fortunate in to being raised in a loving family and had siblings and went to good schools. And I went to a school in Houston called St. Thomas High School, which is a well-known Catholic boys' school, and had good sporting teams, good academic, did well in school, did well in football in high school, and was offered a number of college scholarships, and chose to go to LSU, or Louisiana State University. And so I went to LSU and majored in finance, and I later stayed and got an MBA. But during my undergraduate years, a lot of my focus was on playing football and making the football team. And I was fortunate enough to play all 3 years and be a starting defensive tackle and captain of in my senior year, and we won the Southeast Conference Championship. So I was really blessed to be on winning teams and have a good experience there. Coming out of college, I was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in a late round choice, and I was really too small. I was a very good college player, but I was married. I got married a year ahead of that, and my wife had asked me before we got married. She said it was her choice that I didn't play pro football, and I think I don't ever regret the decision. I decided not to try. There was not a lot of money in it back in the day. I think if I'd have made the team, I was going to make $21,000 my first year. So I decided to pursue an MBA, and I'd been commissioned in the service through ROTC. So I tell people I had three choices. I could go to the NFL and get hurt, I could go to Vietnam and get killed, or I could get a master's in business. And so I became a good student. And so I got an MBA, stayed there, and during the year and a half I was in the MBA program, the Vietnam War pretty much ended, and I only had to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky for 3 or 4 months and do a short amount of duty. Moved back to Houston after my military and got in the real estate business in a partnership with my father, and my dad and I worked together in real estate from 1973 to late 80s or so, and Houston was booming back then, and we did well early. I thought I was smart, but I was just really kind of lucky, and I went through the normal struggles I was somewhat of a workaholic, and my priorities, I would tell you my priorities were God, family, and work, but my actions belied that, and I really was more work, family, God maybe. So I had to make some modifications in my work behavior and slow down a little bit, even in my mid-30s to 40s. So
it sounds like life is really good.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, I was blessed. I married my high school sweetheart. I lived in the same house. I've lived in the same house the last 41 years. I mean, same place. My family was around. I've had a blessed life. I did well early, financially early well. I got some financial problems as the dips and turns of real estate business, and had some rough years there in the mid 80s to mid 90s. And but life was generally good, and I was doing well. Had 2 beautiful kids, and everything was going great. But I was working hard, chasing deals, and in 1984, the real estate market changed, and I had some things that I was involved in financially didn't go well, and I started to hit the wall. And I went into a serious depression at that time, and clinical depression, chemical depression, whatever. I didn't know what it was. I really didn't know how to handle it. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe the doctors. I was still in my go-go football days in my mind. I was 36 years old, and I thought I could just pull myself up by the bootstraps and move on through it. And I got over it fairly quick because I was young and stronger, and I did make some changes. It was a painful experience. I'll never forget it, but I did make some changes in my life, and I did prioritize some things. But through the situations I was in business-wise and some situations with the IRS, I was already in the battle, and I had to work through that. So I went through about 11 years of struggle financially and business-wise, and had a lot of cases with the IRS, and it was kind of it wasn't exactly a fair deal, but I'll get into it. Let's not go into detail. But so I had a somewhat of a difficult time from the mid '80s to early '90s. Although my life was good and my family was good, my health was good, other than the depression I had. I really struggled with it because it sort of knocked my props out. I was a go-go type A, and all of a sudden I didn't have any energy and lost appetite. I had a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. I think my faith and my wife really helped me the most, and she'd pull me out of bed and we'd go to the health club and work out and do some things to get me back on the path that I needed to be. And I guess just endured. Although I was in a pretty dark place, and I have compassion for people that have serious depression. It's like anything else, if you've experienced it, you understand it a lot better. And I think that helped me in some ways develop compassion for people, and gave me a desire to do some changes in my lifestyle and reprioritize some things at age 36, 37.
So young.
Yeah, I was young, and I said to myself, I don't ever want to go through this again. It was so painful, it was so foreign, so dark. I said, I don't care if I have to move down to the coast and have a fishing camp. I said, I'm just not going to endure this. So I was scared of it because of the remembrance of it, and how it's really a dangerous illness, as you say in the current news today. People literally die from that illness, and I certainly don't judge them. I went to a workshop one time, and they said people don't commit suicide because they want to die. They commit it because they're in such pain. Yes. And I can say that depression was maybe the most painful experience I ever had. One of the most painful at that point in time. It certainly was till later. My sister Marilyn was fifth in a family of 8. I was fourth. We're very close, 19 months apart, a year apart in school, had all the same friends. She actually got me the first blind date with my wife 54 years ago. We were in high school, and so she was friends with my wife, and we were all just really close. And my sister, in coming up, we were fourth and fifth in a family of 8, so we were sort of in the middle, and we bonded. We were soulmates. Two 19-year-old strangers, followed her into her apartment in a very nice area of Houston, and they had a little paring knife, and Testimonies said that they were trying to find a skinny woman, steal a car, and go to a town about 80 miles from Houston. And as horrible as it would have been if they had tied her up and stolen her car, she'd still be with us. She was 43 years old at the time. And they hid and they jumped. She came down the hall and they jumped out, and one of the killers was a guy about my size, and he held her down and started stabbing her with the little paring knife. And then the other killer, was a female, and she went in and got this wooden butcher block of knives from the kitchen, and it was a horrible scene. The detective told me that night, I'll just never forget, he said, "There's 6 knives on the floor in there." He said, "It's a very strange murder scene." But what they did, they stabbed her with a bigger knife and planted a butcher knife in her throat. And then what gave me great horror and sleepless nights a lot of was she wasn't dead at that point, because they hit her in the head with a statue of a mother and child that was on the desk, and then wrapped a plastic cleaning bag around her head. So it was a very brutal, vicious, random, unnecessary murder. As bad, like I say, they could have achieved their purpose if that's what they wanted as a car. They just didn't care. I mean, they weren't on drugs, they weren't drunk, they were of sound mind, and they were just didn't care. And he testified in court, and it was on the tape, and they played it. It was just chilling. He said, what were last words? And he said, "Please don't kill me, I have 2 kids. And her children were the same age as these killers. And basically what she told them, she threw $13 out of her pocket. That's what they got, $13. She said, "Here, you can have this money," but she said, "I'm not going to give you my car, And then they said she started screaming when she didn't, it wasn't like, look, give us your car, we're going to kill you. That wasn't the deal. She just saw these two kids and she said, here, I'll give you some money, but I got a new car and you're not going to steal my car. And so that happened, and her daughter, her 19-year-old daughter, actually came home and was at the other end of the apartment and actually walked into some wetness on the rug, and it was her mother's blood. And she called my mother, her grandmother, up and screaming, and went over there later that night. It was never forget it. It's 25 years ago in some ways, but in some ways it was a few days ago. There's a lot of post-traumatic stress that goes with having family. If you don't have to be the victim, to be anybody around it, and it just affects so many people. Had to have counselors for people. She was a real estate agent in people at her office, and she had a real gift of being everybody's best friend. They said they had 30-something people call and say she was her best friend. And her gift was her personality and her charisma, and she was just quite a charming and beautiful and fun person to be around. Well, from that point, at first I was just angry and revengeful, and I wanted to kill these people. I mean, I really, at the trial, I said today, and I was talking to, I said, at the guy's trial, it was about a year later, and he wasn't very far away from me, and I saw myself in my mind just going and ripping, choking him to death. And I really, honestly, I would have killed him if I could have and not had any consequences. That's how angry I was. I don't think I could have physically killed the female just because female, but I was in a bad place. And that was a year after the murder, so I didn't get much healing the first 2 or 3 years at all. Then he got convicted. Both of them were convicted and sent to death row. Which they were young, and the jury said because of the murder was so useless and so vicious, and the jury was out a very short period of time, both on the guilty phase and the death penalty phase in both trials. Then a year after that, which would have been 2 years after the murder, the girl killer went to on trial and was sent to death row. And the guy died of AIDS on death row about 5 years after the murder. But here we are 25 years later, and the girl's still on death row in Texas. She's the longest standing female on death row in Texas. And there's only about 50 females in the United States on death row. So we did not have life without parole in Texas at that time. So that's another subject, the death penalty, but that would have been my choice and most of my family's choices. But at that time, there was no way to assure that she would stay in prison the rest of her life. And the girl was actually the leader of the two, which is very unusual. And they proved through the fingerprints that she helped do the stabbing. But in the testimony of the planning, and she was sort of the alpha person in the two. He was a follower. And anyway, so that's what happened. And so she's been in prison since then. I looked up at the sky, and I kind of said, God, this really hadn't changed. Just because they were convicted and sent to death row, that really didn't offer me or my family members really much healing. We kind of thought it might, and thought it would dissipate the anger. I was pleased that they were convicted and they were off the street and wouldn't hurt anybody else, but I really had a lot of work to do to heal. So for the next 3 years after that, I started really on a spiritual journey of reading a lot of spiritual books. I became an avid reader of various authors, and Henry Nouwen and Thomas Merton, and lots of really good spiritual books. I started going to Bible studies regularly. I had small groups of men that we met with, accountability groups, and I really started doing a serious spiritual journey, which I was in a bad place. I felt like I was the one in prison, and this anger and rage put me in a different place. I was like a different person. One week I started waking up and I said, oh my gosh, it's back. And that demon that I said I would never, I made a lot of changes and I didn't want it to ever happen to me again. He'd come back, and I was angry because I felt like I had done a lot to change my own lifestyle, and I felt like the first time I kind of worked myself into that position, But the second time, I felt like circumstances, and it was really my sister's murder that was a catalyst. So I really did get to a dark place again. I was dealing with the depression better because I knew more about it the second time around, but I was in that black hole, and this spiritual journey I took sort of took me out of it. But I really did have to come to terms and come to a place where I said, God, I'm just surrendering. Look, I've tried to do it my way, and I had tried to surrender in those 10 years, and I had done partial. A man told me one time, you give the manila envelope to God, but you hold on to the corner and you keep pulling it back. And I think most of us, even believing Christians, and do that most things. But I said, this time I'm really going to make an unconditional total surrender. Even heard a sermon on it and wrote my pastor a note, said, you're my witness. I'm unconditionally surrendering my life to God and God's will, and we'll see what happens. And so that was sort of a big turning point. I think it happened over a period of time, and it came to a crescendo there probably about a year after my sister was murdered. And then I started getting back on a track that was positive and increasing my faith and my relationship with Christ and God, and things started moving in a positive direction. So the depression started lifting, and I was able to work my way through that with God's grace and help. And, my faith. Somebody asked me, "Did your faith help you?" I said, "Well, my faith, really deep faith from the past, taught me where to go when I was in trouble, and I didn't know if that was the solution, but I thought that was the only chance I had. So, in strengthening my faith, I really had a reawakening, a rebirth, so to speak, and got into a more relationship with Christ, with God, studied the Bible more, and got myself in a better place spiritually. And then I think in our workshop today, a woman really hit a nerve with me. She said, I think forgiveness is a gift. And for me, I felt like I didn't sit there and say, I got to forgive. I didn't say, the Lord's Prayer says I got to forgive, or God won't forgive me. I just thought I'd get in a better place spiritually, and as a result, I think the gift of forgiveness that God gave me was just grace, and it lifted a big burden off of me. And I realized in about 1998 that I had gotten a lot further. A couple things happened that made me realize that. Somebody said 2020 wanted to talk to me, and they called me, and they really wanted to stir up somebody that wanted to go execute someone. They were really looking for a vigilante type thing, and anger. And I realized after talking to him, I wasn't angry. The lady kept trying to prod me, and I said, look, if you're looking for somebody that really wants to inject the drugs, it's not me. I'm okay with her staying in prison, but I'm in a different place now. She said, I'll call you next week. Well, that was 20 years ago. So I hung up, and I realized, I said, I'm not carrying that deep anger anymore. And surrender was a word that was not in my vocabulary. I thought surrender was weakness. As you said, I was kind of a man guy, charge ahead, type A, conquer the hill. My brother once said that he said I woke up every day thinking it was the Super Bowl, the Olympics, and the World Series all wrapped up into one. And so I didn't know what surrender really was. It was just not part of my DNA the way I was raised, and I'm not justifying or saying it's right or wrong. So as I became broken through these two depressions, I did what I would call a partial surrender, the first one, and changed a lot of things, gave up a lot of things, but I still hadn't got to that total surrender, that deeper surrender, that unconditional surrender. And after my sister was murdered, Marilyn was murdered, and I went through another depression, and with the advantage of experience at once and knowing kind of more about it and seeing where things are going and maybe getting a little further in the end of my rope, then I said, I'm just going to make an unconditional surrender and turn my life over to God and see what happens. And I think I really did that. And I think I can look back, and that was over 20 years ago, maybe 22, 23 years ago. And I can see that I call my old life and my new life sort of since then. And I can see God's blessings In fact, I'd be in a situation or a financial problem or something, and something would happen, and a friend of mine, we called them 1099 G's, because God's grace would show up, and I'd be in a little financial bind or something with the kids or whatever, and it just life started working for me without struggling and gritting and gnawing my teeth, you know, and it was by prayer and grace it was working more. Obviously, I had to put some effort out, but I knew that God was involved. I once heard a guy that I read a lot about, he says if he can keep his part in single digits in the percentage of 100, if he can keep his part like at 3% and God at 97, he's good. And when he gets up close to 10%, I've started to try to live. If he thinks he's doing close to 10%, he's getting in trouble. And I would say in my whole life, I would give God 3% of the credit and me 97. And that works both ways. If you succeed on the days, on the weeks and the years you're doing good, it's great. But then when you have failures, which we all do, you take it more personal. I went to a psychologist, talked to him, and he said, in the 80s, he said, you got more woulda, coulda, shouldas than anybody I've ever worked with. And so I was trying, my expectations were not realistic. And I look back, and they said, look, you just had a really kind of charmed life your first 36 years. You didn't have anything really bad happen to you. You might think it's bad, but so I really developed that confidence, but not relying on God and not really seeing the big picture. And I like it a lot better this new way. Okay. It doesn't insulate you and isolate from God, from the problems of the world. I think it allows you to approach things when you do have problems in a different way. It allows you to deal with them better. You don't panic. You don't have as much fear. And down deep, I really feel a sense of undergirding that God is covering my back, so to speak, that everything's going to be okay, that God is going to take care of me and my family. And that doesn't mean everything will be perfect. It doesn't mean something bad might happen. I think I told you that one of my sons got in a paralyzing ski accident. Yeah, it was bad, it was tough, but it happened after I'd gone through this, and I think I handled it a lot better than I would have if it had been before that. So shortly after that, someone asked me to volunteer for a new pilot prison program. It was in a prison near Houston. It was sponsored by a prison fellowship ministry in the state of Texas Victim Services called Sycamore Tree out of the Gospel of Luke. And it was taking people that had been affected by crime, victims or family members, and meeting with like offenders, not the offender. And they had a concept and they had a one-page outline. And I participated in that project in the spring of 1998. And it dramatically impacted me. I saw the change in the men. I had a guy in my group that at first said he didn't kill a person that he was in for, and by the end of it he admitted it and prayed for their family. After the program was over, he met with the mother of the girl he killed. I saw him change. I saw his face change. I saw his body change, his way he talked in a 3-month period. So I felt really interested and later felt moved and called almost. I was trying to re-engage and getting some involved in some other business things, and nothing was working. And God was just kind of pulling on me. I've never felt that kind of a call. It was like God just kept pursuing me to do this. I said, okay. And I was driving back from a conference in another part of Texas, and down the freeway, I looked up the sky. I said, all right, God, you're going to have it your way anyway, so I'll try this. And that was in October of '98, and we met with a couple of friends that said they'd help a little financially. When I decided to start a nonprofit, thinking of a name, and interesting enough, I was fortunate enough to meet Sister Helen Prejean, who the movie Dead Man Walking was made about. And she came to the prison and spoke, and I'll never forget something she said. She looked at the inmates and said, there's all kind of half lives out there, but what we're talking about is full life, and it's out of the Gospel of John 10, full life, not half life. And I think it talks about our Father has many mansions and full life. And so I thought about, that's where the word life came to my mind. And I said, man, we got to get these guys to a full life, to understand what full life is. And it doesn't necessarily mean money, but a full spiritual life. And about that time, my wife and I took a trip that fall to New England, and I saw these covered bridges. And the word bridges came to my mind. That's really the truth of how it happened. So I thought about bridges, I thought about life. And then I had a friend from high school that was really successful in the advertising business, and we went one evening and just spent a couple of hours writing different ways, bridges on, bridges to, and between the two of us, we came up with this name, Bridges to Life, and we capitalized the T for a reason, because we're going to somewhere. A number of people mispronounce it, say Bridges of Life, and that would have been a good name, but the to has more action. We're going to somewhere, and even in our book and our logo, it shows the logo of a red kind of stick figure moving over a bridge to green. Red represents anger, green represents peace. So both the victim and the offender take this walk over this bridge from anger to peace, and it has a sun underneath. That's God's light is holding up the bridge. So through God's grace, they walk through a change and they move from anger to peace. So that's kind of how the bridge, and it's worked real well for us. And it's probably the only thing I've done in my life that I totally gave to God from day one, and have kept that promise. I haven't kept my fingers on the manila envelope. I've handed it to him, and I realize that. And so with that idea in mind, we went forward. We obviously struggled because it was such a new concept. The biggest struggle was the prison system even going to let us keep coming, and were they going to accept it? And so one by one, we started going to prisons. As I said, in 1999, we one prison, 41 inmates, and then the next year we went to 3 or 4 prisons, and we started adding staff and starting volunteers. And fast forward to this day now, over the last 20 years, we've been in 155 prisons, and we've graduated through our 3-month program 42,000 inmates, male and female, all over. As I say, about 75% of them in Texas, but in other places. And each one of these inmates has met the requirements and gone through. They've either been affected, changed, transformed in varying degrees. They've been impacted. And it's developed a very good reputation in Texas, where men line up and there's a waiting list for them to take this course. And even the parole board has recognized it as a very unique program and pays attention to it when men take this program and sees the value of it. So brick by brick, I can see how my past life of having business experience and education led to helping me on the business side of this. Many nonprofits fail or don't grow because of the business part. And fortunately, I'd been in Houston all my life, and as my sons say, you weren't rich, but you knew some rich people. But I was fortunate enough to know a few people that helped get it started, where it's getting some momentum, because it's very difficult to get money from foundations and institutions when you first start, because they want you to have a track record. It's like getting credit when you don't have any credit. And so individuals and churches were our first supporters, and that got us going. And then we were able to raise money from foundations. We get a large percentage from foundations, large percentage individuals. And so that's another side of the work that we do that is necessary. It's not quite as interesting as the ministry part, but it's a necessary piece. And knock wood, we've been able to raise our budget. Out of 20 years, there was only 1 year that we fell short. We have a reserve that we can cover that. So that's been a big piece of my effort up to this point in time. The last couple of years, we've keep growing and growing. I've delegated a lot, but we keep growing, so I'm still real busy, even though I've handed off quite a bit. But I intend to hand off more and bring in another management, and we do have a succession plan. We have a COO that's 54 years old, so he was an 11-year volunteer before he went. He's got quite a story. You would like to interview him, by the way. And he is doing a great job as a chief operating officer. And I've turned most of the operations over, but I'm still really involved on a day-to-day basis. And so my goal going forward is to be involved in strategy, be involved in money in, fundraising, and money out, expenses, and watch that. But I'm trying to turn loose a little more of the operation side to him. I've done a lot. And I see Bridges to Life continue growing. We make a 1-2 year plan. I was meeting with a professional advisor type, and they said, why don't you have a 5-year plan? And if you're in 100 prisons now, why don't you go to 200? And I said, well, that's not a bad idea. However, I don't want a forced march type thing. We believe that God's going to bring, if we do the right thing, keep working, God's going to bring the opportunities for growth. For instance, this year I projected 12% growth, and we're probably going to grow like 22% in terms of number of inmates that graduate. So we're really busy. We're growing. We've grown from where we were. We 4-year, 5-year period we doubled in size. So we're large now. We're dealing with a lot of people. As I said, we have 800 active volunteers and 19 staff, so it's a lot to manage.
This is just in Texas right now, because you said, or most of it.
Most of it, yeah, 75% in Texas, but we're starting to do more. Like last year, we were 75% of our graduates were Texas. This year, it'll be about 70%. So we're doing more outside of Texas and other states such as Indiana, Washington, California, Colorado, North Carolina, doing a little bit in Florida. Our objective is to grow and to help as many inmates and many victims heal as we can, but we want to maintain our quality. So it's really not to grow as much as we can, as much as possible. It's to grow while maintaining quality. Because the quality of what we do, it's not hard or complicated, but it really does need to be done a certain way, or pretty soon you had an apple and you end up with an orange. It's a slippery slope. It can change, and there's certain things we do that we have to toe the line on, and our volunteers have to cooperate, and for instance, we ask a lot of questions, we listen, we try not to talk too much, or we don't preach or give a lot of advice, and we allow the inmate to enter into the discussion and be a part of it, where most of what they do they're lectured to. So they really participate in it, and they get to tell their story, and they're treated like humans, and they're treated with respect, and they on that particular night, they feel like a human being. Because crime dehumanizes both the offender and the victim. So there are these two groups that have, through these incidences, these horrible, some unspeakable incidences, have been dehumanized. We try to put a humanity back into it. And our spiritual mission is to show both inmates and victims the transforming power of God's love and forgiveness. And that's been our spiritual mission since day one. Our secular mission is to bring the community together and help them rehabilitate and heal to reduce the rate of recidivism, to reduce the ones that come back. We've been very fortunate on large studies we're running about 14% recidivism, which means 86%. It's a 3-year study after they get out, do not come back, and that's less than half of maybe almost a third of the national average. So we've done real well. The program's proven to work in that capacity. And then we get a lot of feedback from wardens and people in the chaplains in the prison system that the program is unique and working well. And we are forming collaborations. We don't do anything after they get out of prison. And one of the pushes that I'm on personally now and we've had collaborations, we're trying to form active, deep collaborations where we can refer our graduates to people that do the reentry work when they get out, because that is a missing piece. And I don't intend to get into that hands-on because we're doing what we do, but they got to have some help when they get out. They got to have a place to live, they got to have a job, they got a driver's license, and we've just entered a collaboration with a group in Houston that it connects with them inside, picks them up at the prison, has 80 pounds of food for them the first day, a closet clothes, and takes them either to their housing or to wherever they're going to live, and then they're doing job placement. There's such thing as job preparedness, which is good, but they need a job within a couple of weeks, even if it's a small job or a menial job or whatever. They got to get to work, and then that way it helps their dignity, and they can make some money, and they got to get back and re-engaged in the world. So we're trying to make partnerships with people that can help do that, particularly in the major metropolitan areas like Houston and Dallas. My first half of life, first 36, 40 years, I had a lot of successes. I had success in school, I had success in sports. I had financial successes as a young man. Looking back, that was young. And there was something missing. I still felt like I was dragging rocks around, but I thought that was just the way you're supposed to live. And then when I went into the serious clinical depression, the rocks became boulders and I was overwhelmed. Now, as I said, I think faith was a big piece of working out of that. That was kind of like the foundation of the house, but it wasn't the roof and the studs and the walls. I also went through talk therapy. I went through medicines. I tried various medicines. Exercise was real important. And in the faith component, praying, studying, and what helped me, one time I read a book about a very religious person, actually a nun. She got depressed and she said she couldn't pray. And so it made me, I don't want to say made me feel better, but it actually said, hey, if she can't pray, then when I'm feeling in the desert, I got to just keep working. It's kind of a normal function that happens. So anyway, you have all those things and you still have that hole in your heart or that sack of rocks you're still pulling around, and it's not real joy. It's not full life, as chapter 10 of John says. It's a half or three-quarters life. Looks good on the outside, and it's not bad. It's nice to have things, but to have the real full life, after I went through both depressions and hardships, the quote that really drove me into this is Ernest Hemingway quote that says, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken place. My journey was to find out how to be strong at the broken. It was a real journey. I gave that quote to the lady with Victim Services when I first met her, and I said, I have a vision. I want to get something going to help victims. But why do some people become strong at the broken place, and why do some people go to drugs, alcohol, suicide, whatever? And I'm not judging either side. The pain is real. But I think there are a number of components. But I think faith, to me, faith was the most important. And with that, I could gather and grab the other things. But I was in such pain that I was willing to try whatever would help me. But I don't think you can just get on your knees and say, God help me. I think, I heard a saying, God can't steer a ship in harbor. You've got to get in motion and try to do some other things that are holistic, as you say, and have some help from the right doctors. And it's a sickness that you have to work out of, and you got to have family support. I think it's an isolating type disease, and the more you isolate yourself, the worse position you get in. So I think the people that have depression problems, I think they can get hope. I think they can get to a brighter place, and knock wood, since I really turned the corner of that, I haven't had any serious depression problems in 20 years. I've had some burnout problems, and they scare me because they start to look like depression, but I have not had a minor or medium or serious depression since I went through that experience after my sister's murder.
We hope you were inspired by the true story of John Sage, inspired to know that God's way is the best way, that His plans are to give us a hope and future, and to use our talents and gifts for kingdom purposes. May the Lord richly bless you.
Every year we have what we call a vision luncheon, and we share our vision of what we are, what our mission is, and our vision for the future. And we started this 17 years ago with about 50 people. And for the last 10 or 12 years, we've had over 400 people at every one, and today was our largest crowd of about 450 people. Our uniqueness of our program is that we bring victims of crime into the prison. We tell the victimization story to put a face on crime so these guys can see the pain and the problems they cause people and develop more empathy and feel about their victims. Most of them are totally unaware, they bury it, and for the first time they start thinking about their victims. And if they can develop enough empathy for their victims, then their hearts will soften and they're less likely to commit crimes and hurt people. A great program for us. We do it once a year in each of these cities, and we appreciate all the people that come and help us.
I had been in prison 4 times. I had been out for like 16 years, but I was still in a prison within myself, an emotional prison. And telling the stories and listening to the stories helped me begin to tell my story and not have so much shame, and just a part of forgiveness and realizing that the person that I hadn't forgiven was myself. And it just helped me grow and mature, and I volunteered for about 5 years. And John Sage decided to expand. I went part-time, and this year I went full-time with Bridges to Life. And I'm just excited to be here today and just watch the lives that are changed and transformed in the prisons. We graduated our men's prison Wednesday night at the Boyd Unit. We actually had a Muslim guy who came in, and week 13 he gave his life to Jesus, and that makes it all worth it.
It's just been a great opportunity to help crime victims that are volunteers as well as offenders, and it's been kind of surreal to see how I get instant credibility just because I was an offender's kid when I volunteered with inmates. But it's been great to watch men change. I do believe this program teaches men and women how to really change and make better choices when they get out of prison. I went not only from a victim's kid, I now became an offender's kid. And that's a big change because people treat you differently as an offender's kid, you know? When you say you're sorry to somebody, the other person starts healing. And I didn't want any part of that, but he said something. He goes, Jim, I've hit rock bottom in prison for 3 years. Nobody has visited me, called me, put money in my books. Everybody I know checked me off, his own parents, his brother, me and my 2 brothers. There was nothing different about me versus them. I wasn't any better than them. I didn't judge them. I hope they didn't judge me. They had just made some bad choices that got them in prison. You don't have to wear that label. That does not have to define your life. That is not who you have to be the rest of your life. And I started volunteering after I left prison that day because I realized men can change, women can change, but it takes volunteers to help that process through. I think people can change. I wouldn't waste my time. And I have been so surprised how that has healed me the most. And I tell offenders today, you have an opportunity when you got out of jail to not commit crime again, which will help heal your victim. It's incredible how healing it is when somebody gets out and lives a productive life and gives back and serves and volunteers. And I think it's possible.
We're either going to make a big impact or we're not going to do it, and I think it's proven that it does that. I would like anybody who ever volunteered for Bridges to Life to stand up, and we're gonna raise. Please stand up. Please stand up. Got a lot of people here. All right. That's the heart and soul of Bridges to Life. I think the biggest mission field in the United States. It's a dark place. Satan has control of it, and lots of dark things happen in there, and we just bring this big old beaming, shining light in there with our 550 volunteers every week. And forgiveness is really at the heart of it and the core of it. They deserve a chance to rehabilitate as human beings.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Buford. When I first enrolled into Bridges to Life, it was pretty challenging. I didn't like to open up, I didn't like to share, but you know, holding on to so much darkness is not good. And Miss Eva and Miss Jackie taught me that they are the teachers in Bridges to Life, my teachers. So just listening to the other women's stories and how they were so bold and courageous to tell their stories, it just made me want to open up more and to tell mine and to get all of that darkness out of me. So the different assignments they had us do, I did mine at nighttime because that's when I had a peace of mind. And I put my all into it, and I gave it a shot. I wasn't scared, and I wasn't scared of judgmental people. I wasn't scared what nobody thought of me. I I opened up and I put it out there and I left it out there. So the experience with Bridges to Life, it was very good. I cried, I laughed, I was happy, I was sad, and it was an amazing experience for me. It was very positive, and I would never, ever forget it. It changed my life. Bridges to Life changed my life. I'm gonna take all the tools that they taught me, and I'm just gonna put them to use. And I'm gonna have a very brighter future, positive future. I believed I was forever going to be a product of my environment. My title has always been a baby's mother with no education, no dreams nor goals. Promiscuous, a thief, and very irresponsible. No future. I was existing and not living. I took that 3 year with no hesitation because I knew if I didn't get any structure in my life, I was going to die. Literally die. I thought God didn't love me anymore. I'm a better woman now, and I owe it all to Bridges to Life in Bambi. I learned that I was broken because I hadn't forgiven myself for all the pain that I caused myself and my victims I accumulated doing my criminal activities. When I got to Bambi, I was a broken down Cadillac. But Bambi put a new motor in me, and Bridges to Life put a new engine in me and gave me a new body, and now I'm a 2016 Porsche. I may not come when you want me to, but I'm always on time. I've had my shares of ups and downs, when there were times when no one else was around. God came and spoke these words to me. Praise will confuse the enemy. So I started clapping and I started dancing. People were laughing, for they knew my problems, for they knew my pain. God said he'll take them all away. God said he'll take them all away. That's why I praise him in advance. Praise him in advance. He's giving me a second chance. I praise him in advance.
Things were said, things were done that were never brought to the surface and asked for forgiveness for and reconciled to. I began to drink and drink and drink and drink. I lived in fear and anxiety for a very, very long time. There was something inside of me that knew I was better than that. There was something I knew I was better than that. But somehow I kept landing in the same place over and over again. And I only had one place to look. That was up. That was the beginning of my journey in restoring my life and restoring peace back into my life. Responsibility, accountability, confession, repentance, forgiveness, reconciliation, and restitution are all things that we practice every day of our lives. I receive God's forgiveness, but he's asking me to give it to others as he's given it to me. God has restored my family. Giving back brings peace into my life.
My name is Wesley Jenkins. I'm a 3-time graduate of the Bridges to Life program. I served 27 years in prison in TDC for murder, and this program brought me to an introspection of myself that would allow me to grow and to come out of the darkness that I was in. In this program, we're taught about responsibility and taking ownership of actions. Also taught us about amendment, making restitution, reaching out to those people that we've harmed. And for me, not only was my victim family harmed, but my family did time with me as well. I kind of killed 2 people, my victim and as well as my supposed future. Bridges to Life let me understand that my future is still there. I did not believe that people that were victims of violent crimes could actually love someone like me. No program changes individuals. Individuals change themselves with the tools that they learn through the program.
I see shattered, you see whole. I see broken, but you see beautiful. And you're helping me to believe. You're restoring me piece by piece. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. What was dead now lives again. My heart's beating, beating inside my chest. Oh, and I'm coming alive with joy and destiny. Oh, you're restoring me piece by piece. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. There's nothing too dirty, Lord, you can make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. I am clean. Washed in the blood of your sacrifice. Your blood flowed red and made me white. My filthy rags are now purified. I am clean. Ooh, you washed in the blood of your sacrifice. Your blood flowed red and made me white. My dirty rags are now purified. I am clean, 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 washed in the blood of your sacrifice. Your blood flowed red and made me white. My filthy rags are now purified. I'm clean, I'm clean, I'm clean, washed in the blood of your sacrifice.